It says each area outage could affect more than the street that is identified on any one line.
Okay.
The Kings Row, there was an outage up in Marblehead Street,
Right.
and that affected part of Kings Row. We had another problem up in Kings Row that there was a bushing that failed on one of the pad mount transformers. So when we were trying to put Kings Row back in, it faulted on us because of that. So what we had to do is we had to go in there and change out the pad mount. But yeah, that Marblehead Street area outage would have affected Kings Row. And actually it affected some of Peter and Anthony, and then Peter and Anthony had another problem too that was right in that area.
So it's true that the residents don't have to call you. You guys will know they're out.
Yeah. That's the thing that you try to express. We couldn't put every street that got affected, because some of, I mean, Central Street, look at how many streets are up there. Everything off of Central Lee and Hancock and everything that's up there. I don't discourage the customers from calling. When we get your call, when we got you on the list, it is, what we have is something, an outage management system that's a kind of relational database that says, okay, this outage here is related to that one, so it all gets a tag. We were still working out some of the streamlining that outage management system, but that's kind of what we try to do, so that we know that area outages include a bunch of streets. It's a daunting task at the beginning of the storm, but like I said, once you get a handle on what's out,
Yeah.
and I can get the information out in some orderly fashion to the towns, it gets a little better.
Here's the challenge for the residents, okay? We'll take the people up in the Kings Row area as a good example. They didn't know when the electricity was coming on, and we were really having a hard time communicating to them too. Most of them have cell phones now and get on the internet through their cell phone. But they don't know whether to go to a hotel or not. Is there a way that you could build a website that they can at least log into through their cell phone, or have a friend that does have power to see when there is gonna be an estimate, so that people know whether to go to a hotel instead of sitting in these cold houses at 45 degrees?
Yeah, well, as I said in this last storm, the message on Monday was, if you weren't in power on Monday, be prepared to be out till Thursday, because we try we try to get to the
But we didn't get that message out, because I don't think,
Okay,
we're
good.
fixing that too. We're gonna actually try to invest in maybe a reverse 911 type system to help us too, and try to use our internet and so on. But it would be good for I think or your customers to be able to find a way to go to you directly through the internet, electronic media, to get this type of information as well.
Right, we had our post-mortem that we have on all storms, and the website will be utilized more with respect to these lists. The prioritization is always a bit tough when you have the myriad of outages that we have, but we try to prioritize things so that people know if they have to make plans to go to a hotel or to relatives or something like that. We're also looking at the possibility of using social media, Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook. I don't know how many people would use that or we can reach with it, but if it's certainly not going to break the bank, that's something that we ought to consider.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, because people, you know, some people are, they say, no, I don't use that, I don't use social media, I don't know what you're talking about. But there's some people that are requesting it, that it's, the weirdness of this storm was that, and we pride ourselves in the fact that no kids missed school in the service territory. All the schools were back in service. The kids went to school, the parents went to work. A lot of calls that I had gotten were from customers that were at work saying, I'm calling you, I want to make sure you know I'm out, but I'm at work now.
Right.
You know, so it was, and the snow was gone by Monday, and it's, you know, it's just, it was difficult. The storm was difficult.
But I think you're going in the right direction. Using social media is an important thing, because even though you have someone like Mr. Jones, no offense, who thinks a keyboard is something that he hangs his keys on, but he may have a neighbor or even a relative that will have access to social media and be able to walk over and talk to him and keep him updated. I mean, this community, I have to say, they did come around and help people. I even had people sleeping at my house. And it was wonderful the way they came together, but if we had a way to at least get some information to them, so they know whether, do I have to spend 2-3 nights in this hotel? I mean, it would be nice if we could try to find a way. I know there's no 100% answer, but if we can get an 80 or 90% solution, it'd be much better than I think what we have today.
Chairman, are we looking at trimming trees on a more regular basis, or, before it happens?
Yeah,
I mean, it's always been a big question with the utilities as to whether or not enough is done to prevent the outages.
We have one full-time tree trimming crew, and we've had them on for maybe the better part 10, 12 years. Then we have...
So they're finally getting around to us? No.
Well, no, they, you know, you can't put a number on how much worse it would be if we didn't trim. We do have another crew that we put on for a third of the year. They trim in the winter. We may look at putting a second crew on for more of the year, more than a third of the year. The other thing is, though, that when a private tree, a whole tree falls into a line with that wet, heavy snow, that's something that, I mean, we wouldn't trim. We wouldn't go in 20 feet on a private property to trim.
Right.
What we trim is things that are directly could affect the lines. They might be within 2 or 3 feet of lines. The branches might be right into the lines. But we don't go and trim really aggressively like other utilities might. It doesn't, politically, it's not the right thing to do.
It's not the right thing to do?
Well, not when you see shock bites out of, that's what I call them. There's some utilities, I'm not gonna name any names,
Well, I'm not saying everybody does a good job,
Yeah.
but
But I mean, when a whole tree falls into a line, it doesn't matter how much trimming you do, when that tree is gonna come
I
down.
don't disagree there, but there's an awful lot of trimming, reasonable trimming that could take place, which would help prevent a lot of some of the outages, you would think. Just a question of whether you think that's worth the effort and expense or not.
Oh, yeah, I think tree trimming's worth it. I just think that you have to, you have, the way we trim, I think, is the right approach to it. We could probably have another crew trimming for more than 3 months a year. But I think that the philosophy we use with trimming is adequate.
So is the commission actually considering that, and yourself, as far as?
The RMLD?
RMLD?
Yeah, that would be my decision.
Your decision? Oh.
Yeah, and I've spoken to engineering and said that we may want to spend a little more money and have have a second crew on for more of the year.
Jeffrey? Yes, Mr. Chair. Steve, thanks for bringing up that question, because that was going to be something that I was going to bring up. First of all, I really think the RMLD does a super job.
Thank you.
I think we respond as quickly as we possibly can. Circumstances, when you have to prioritize, seems like someone's getting a preference over the other, and that's not really true. I always had an issue with the maintenance of maintaining the lines along the roadways with your tree trimming program. I know that this year this storm was affected most by that there were still leaves on the trees to hold the snow.
Mhm.
Okay, and that really exacerbated the situation. But my personal experience, and I share this only because I'm sure other residents have this issue as well. About 5 years ago, my line was ripped from my house, okay, because there was a branch hanging. Ironically, before that, they were doing some tree trimming, and I'd asked them, "Do you think you can get that limb that was over my line?" They said, "No, it's within the guidelines," and so on. And so I got that fixed. But then this storm, they came down my street again, all right, same question, "Can you get that branch?" And they said no. Well, it turns out that branch, again, this time a different branch, because the other one broke last time. This time, this other branch that was there, it was only above it by about 2 feet because of the pine tree, came down, ripped it off my house, and I didn't lose power, fortunately. But I think these types of things, when residents see that you're doing good work, and they, from experience, know that that branch is gonna come down with any weighted snow. I think the people on site should really take that in consideration. So I know in my case, maybe others, that's 2 bits of expense that, a resident has to absorb in the repair of the pipe or the pole and so on. But I think, overall, you guys respond very quickly. A lot of times when I lose power, I never really have to call you because power's on before I even get to the phone sometimes, because either it's a generator or what do you call it, a transformer.
Yeah.
You respond. That's a different issue than it is with a direct line, correct? All right, so, I just, your tree trimming, I think you should be more aggressive, and then I think that's what Steve was kind of alluding to, on trimming the trees around those lines.
I'll look into that.
Okay.
Any other questions? Yes, John.
John Norton, I'm the CAB representative from North Reading to the RMLD. When I first joined the CAB some 11 years ago, the tree trimming operation at that point was probably less than half-time. Through concerted efforts of the board that I'm on, the Board of Light Commissioners, and our General Manager, Vinnie Cameron, we have stepped that process up. As Mr. Cameron has stated, we have 1 full-time crew and at least 3 to 4 months out of the year another crew. But you have to keep in mind that we're a 4-town service territory. So those crews are not just servicing North Reading, they're servicing the other 3 communities on a regular basis. We have foremen that go out and check areas. The worst areas get the first attention as far as tree trimming. Again, I know Mr. Cameron will look at this. We'll look at it as a budget line item. But I think overall, and again, Mr. Yule made one good point, that this was a unique storm in the fact that it hit with a lot of the leaves still on the trees. There's a lot of things that you cannot possibly prepare for, and that's one of them. Usually by that point in time or into November, the leaves have gone, and when you get a heavy wet snow that's 4 to 5 inches, it's gonna take down a fair number of limbs no matter how much tree trimming you do. Conversely, when you look around, and I'm not gonna name utilities, but think back several years ago, the western part of the state, up around the Townsend Pepperell area and just over the bordering communities in New Hampshire, that endured 2 to 3 weeks of outages. With a utility that did virtually no tree trimming maintenance whatsoever, they got caught. In fact, we sent 2 crews up to some of those towns to help out, as Mr. Cameron stated, on mutual aid. So I think the RMLD does a very good job. We've stepped up aggressively that part of the infrastructure maintenance, and I believe we do a decent job with it. Is there room for improvement? Yes, and we will definitely take a look at that in the next budget go-around. But I think we just have to keep in mind that the RMLD does do a very aggressive job in that particular area as well as other areas. Thank you.
Thank you, John.
Thank you, John.
Any other questions?
No, thank you very much.
Thank you, Vinnie.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
The crews did a great job.
Did.
Next item on our agenda is our annual tax classification hearing. What? Yeah, I'll do that in a minute. Okay, first thing I gotta do is read the hearing. So this is notice of a public hearing, tax rate setting and tax classification. The Board of Selectmen will hold a public hearing in room 14 at Town Hall, 235 North Street on November 21st, 2011 at 8 p.m. Prior to making a policy recommendation regarding the tax rate for FY 2012, determining what ratio of tax burden will be borne by residential versus commercial/industrial property for FY 2012, and determine if there will be a residential or commercial exemption. The Board of Selectmen will take input from the public before